I would like to make an emphasis on what I would like to call the creativity response. I would like to mention something which, especially here in Europe and in the US, if you look at different programs, haven't been emphasized. And it's about the neurobiology and clinical psychology and what these disciplines can tell us about learning, creativity, performance, and problem solving. If we look at the current discussion and parts of it, we are discussing about how to set up global education with regard to MOOCs, for example, with regard to what kind of technology we're using. We have a discussion on how do we finance education, whether we rather finance it privately or rather publicly. We had a discussion also this afternoon about the relevance of setting up programs in an interdisciplinary way, in a more contextual way, or in a more translational way. There is a discussion on gender aspects, and there is a discussion whether we should focus on education to simply feed into the demands of the economy, or should we set up programs where basically more humanistic or integral or holistic, so let's say a general education. And eventually it's about how can we provide access to primary care, primary education or higher education. I'm a medical doctor and I'm a psychiatrist, and I'm involved into neurobiology, and I'm interested in findings in clinical psychology and neurobiology, better understanding what's happening in education. So if you look at from a neurobiological medical field into the educational issue, the first thing we have to distinguish between primary education and the purpose of higher education. And they both differ from a medical perspective. From a psychological perspective, primary education is basically about enabling the graduates to function in society, by promoting basic knowledge and literacy in mathematics and science. If we enter higher education, it's actually somewhat different. It's more about preparing the generation to solve complex problems, to assume societal leadership, to take over responsibility, to strive for the truth, or for self-development or self-knowledge. The thesis I would like to discuss this afternoon with you is that most, if not all, educational programs basically do not tap into the full potentials of our mind and of our brain, and therefore often leads to suboptimal outcomes. So if we started to consider findings in clinical psychology, if we start considering findings in neurobiology and social psychology, especially in life science, we would probably come up with a completely different setup of academic programs. And I would like to mention 5 aspects which might sound a little bit weird for you, but from a medical perspective are absolutely relevant in order to create a successful program. The first is about multisensory learning. We have huge, robust database, for example, that mock learning which is basically digital, has a much lower learning curve than multisensory learning. We have, in the medical field now, a pretty robust database that if we start implementing mindfulness-based aspects in our programs, for example, in treating patients or even within the educational setting, we have much better results with regard to creativity, with regard to performance and outcome. You know, if, for example, if we started to have a 5 minutes meditation at the beginning of each lesson, you can measure that the outcome at the end of the class is higher. The same is true for the role of exercise. There is an abundant knowledge that exercise and memory, exercise and hippocampus consolidation, exercise and the link to the prefrontal cortex, and therefore towards the amount of empathy we can generate, the amount of social competency we can generate, the amount of intellectual performance we can generate is linked together. The fourth aspect I would like to mention is nutrition. It might sound a little bit kind of off the track, but if we had more time, I could show you data that what you're eating determines how you're going to perform in your academic fields. We can talk about supplements, we can talk about Mediterranean food, we can talk about processed food, we can talk about the link, for example, between intermittent fasting and intellectual outcome, and eventually the importance of rest and sleep. If we run a program, it doesn't matter whether it's philosophy or mathematics, whether it's in the medical field or psychology or an MBA program, and are able to install intelligent forms of rest phases, we simply increase creativity. You can measure the amount of creativity generated through the prefrontal cortex is linked to the amount of rest and phases you have in between. So my conclusion is, I would like to discuss this afternoon with you is actually regardless to the field of study and regardless to the program we are installing, regardless to whether it's more contextual or more theoretical, whether it's more interdisciplinary or more transdisciplinary, we should consider findings in life science, and they would make a difference. If we start considering these findings, these empirical findings, we can promote a higher performance in our students. We can promote rather leadership and self-esteem. We can promote rather motivational aspects in having better outcome, also with respect to content and creativity. Thank you very much.